Uh,
Cool, cool. All right. Well, here we go. We're going live. Welcome, everybody. Hello. Good afternoon if you're in Central Time or if you're on the East Coast. And good morning if you're on the West Coast. I am your host, George Miller. I am here every Wednesday. Thank you, Jane, from noon to 1 p.m. Central Time. And the way that I run this is I invite you to ask any questions career related. If your questions have to do with today's topic, great. But if they don't worry about it. I like to answer any questions career related and or refer you to somebody who may be able to help more if it's a question that I don't know the answer to. So today's topic, though, is about emotional intelligence and leadership. I'll be getting into that more, but as you're joining in, I invite you to come on to the Zoom link if that's something you'd like. I love it when people jump in on Zoom. I can work with you one-to-one that way, can get updates, etc. If you're not cool with that, totally fine. You can always type your questions into the comment section. Type your questions into the comment section. I'll get to those as best as I can. And usually when you're doing that, I'll start sharing in a broad, big picture about your topic that you brought in. And then I love it when you give me more information. Let me know more specifics about it. Let me know where I'm on with stuff and just fill me in more and we can communicate that way as well. So again, jump in here on LinkedIn or you can be on LinkedIn Live or YouTube. Type your questions into the comment section. And again, all questions career related are fair game. Don't have to necessarily have to do with this topic. So today, I'm going to share some about emotional intelligence and how that plays out in leadership. So this, as I have found over the years of working with people, I am confirming what was established back in 1999 in an article, a New York Times article that Daniel Goleman wrote about emotional intelligence, where it is the most critical skill for a leader to develop. So I want to point this out that emotional intelligence, it's not just an innate thing that we are born with, it's actually a skill that we can develop. I know this to be true. I've shared before about my father, who I would have described as like, I didn't know if he had an emotion in his body. Well, he actually did training in emotional intelligence and he learned how to communicate his emotions effectively. Okay, at an older age. So this is something that you can learn at any point in your career. So it is a skill and it is the most critical skill that we're aware of at this point in human evolution, the most important skill in being an effective leader is emotional intelligence. And one of the reasons for this is taps into the work of a cyberkineticist who said that the element in any system that has the most behaviors available to it doesn't mean they always use all the behaviors, but that with the most behaviors available to it, that is the most powerful element in that system. So it's not the smartest. It's not necessarily just the person who's the best at one thing. But the person who has the most behaviors available to them. And that's a big deal with emotions because all of us, as we were growing up, learned that some emotions were okay to express and some were not. And so as we learn how to get the important data from our emotions, then we learn how to communicate that data more effectively with other people. And it it means that too, in a let's say you're in a really intense meeting. And if you do not have high emotional intelligence, there's a good chance that you're just not going to do or say anything. And just kind of do that freeze response. There's also a good chance that you might overreact. You might say some things that later you regret. You may sometimes you may blame other people. And in a meeting like that, you could just spend the entire time blaming people. It's not effective. It's not an effective communication of our emotions. So what I do with people is I help them start tapping their emotions and start using them in more effective ways. So I'm thinking of a client that I was meeting with, and they're at a transition phase where it's going to be important for them as they're leveling up. They're going to have more of an executive presence. And for them to do that, they're going to need to say more of the truths, the uncomfortable truths about the business. So right now, they're in a culture where there's a norm and there's things that aren't working. And as they're kind of dancing around what's not working, what's becoming more evident is that the leadership needs to change some of their strategies, and that so there needs to be work done by everybody in the company to shift some things. So now, how does somebody deliver that kind of meeting and feedback in a meeting? Well, number one, you may not do it in a meeting. You may set up a private meeting and say, hey, there's some things I wanted to talk to you about. Here's some of what I see going on. And then you're likely to get pushback, likely to have that person say, no, this is the way that everybody, thinks about things. And it doesn't work that way. And you have to be able to take that rejection. You have to be able to feel whatever feelings you have about it. Because if you don't acknowledge that you feel hurt and afraid, your tendency is to then lash out in anger and say, oh, see, I knew this is how they act. Why did I even do this? Why did I even try this? But then if you can not acknowledge the hurt and the fear, they may actually become helpful communication tools and say, I just shared this, and honestly, part of the concern that I have is like right now, this is part the way that you didn't hear the feedback that I'm delivering. This is part of the issue that's going on in this organization. This is something that I understand that it's kind of hard to hear, but I see it as my job to do the best that I can to help things shift. So this what just happened here, and about how you're pushing it off and not taking responsibility. That's part of the issue. So I'm just going to say that, and I'm happy to talk more about this later. Woo! Imagine saying that. Now, there are places where you will just get flat out fired. There are places that will ease you out. There are places where people will actually hear that. One client shared about that, where they actually gave their notice, and their boss was like, no, like, please, like, let me know what's going on. Why are people leaving? And they said, well, I'll tell you why. And they told them, and then their boss said, look, thank you so much for telling me that. I didn't realize that that's how I was communicating to people. Will you help me change how I'm communicating? And he's like, sure, yeah, I'll give you regular feedback on it, totally. And ended up kind of becoming their boss's coach and supporting them in communicating more effectively. So you're not going to do this, and I wouldn't recommend that people jump to that kind of interaction right away, unless you really like taking those risks, because there's a lot that goes into it. It's so easy for us to blame other people, to make it seem to not take our responsibility in it, and that just doesn't work. It's like when someone's blaming me, whatever they're saying to me, I'm already writing off. My system is already saying, no, I'm not hearing that. So as you're thinking about challenges that you have in your career, think about what you're feeling in those interactions: fear, hurt, anger, sadness, and joy. And there's a whole webinar that I did on this topic. So I'll go ahead and throw the recording of that out here. If that's something that you want to dig deeper into, please take a look at that. And what I talk about in that webinar, and I'll share a little bit about here, is how we have this mistaken idea that some people are leaders. Well, if you look at the definition of leadership, it's the ability to influence the thoughts, feelings, and actions of others. And that's everybody. Every single person on this planet is a leader. They're influencing the thoughts, feelings, and actions of others, even if it means that they're just sitting in a meeting, not saying anything. That is still contributing to the meeting. Sometimes speaking up, being the first person to ask a valuable question. Well, a valuable question then comes into that meeting and changes the dynamic of it. And just by that, you're now influencing the thoughts, feelings, and actions of others in a direction that is going to be more beneficial for that meeting. So I encourage you to think about what you're feeling when you are in meetings, and what are ways that you could use that fear or that hurt or that upset or whatever. What are meaningful ways that you could do it? So if we're establishing that we're all leaders, we're all leading towards something. Now, if I'm in a meeting, what am I leading towards? And how do my feelings give me valuable data about what's happening and how to make things work in a more effective way? So now I'm picturing myself in a meeting. Nobody is responding. It's just the one person who's doing a presentation who's talking, and they're starting to talk faster because it's like, oh, they're just trying to get through this thing because they are realizing that nobody's really paying attention. And right there, if I ask a question or if I acknowledge something, oh, I agree with that. I just agree with something they said. It's a simple thing to do. Or if I said, I don't know about that. I'm not sure I agree with that. Right there, any one of those three things I do is a nice on-ramp to having that meeting be more effective, to leading towards better results. And that's just a basic way that any one of us is able to use our emotions to make more of a positive impact in an environment. So that's my first bit about, oh yes, okay, so we were throwing out the video about knowing your personality style and learning other people's as well. So that is a link that you can check to learn more about that. There's a little personality assessment that will give you data about yourself, and then a video that will help you know how to communicate more effectively with others. So we're coming up to 15 minutes here, and I want to say for everybody who has joined in, you are welcome to ask any questions career related. You can jump in here on the Zoom link directly if you'd like. I love it when people do that. I'm able to work with you one-on-one. And any question career related is welcome. You don't have to ask about emotional intelligence. You could talk about your resume, interviewing, managing your company, challenges in that. And I will do my best to answer those questions, and I will probably tie it back to emotional intelligence because that's my expertise. So again, any questions career related are welcome. You're welcome to type those into the comment section on YouTube or on LinkedIn. So before I go a little further with some more educational material, I wanted to check in and see, Eric, is there anything that you want to update me on? Anything? I know you've often got to jump at about 12:30, so I wanted to check in with you.
No, just I guess maybe it's not a major update, just continuing to try to engage more in those KPI meetings that we had talked about last week, or kind of in previous weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you know, as my role is kind of limited in those, but trying to be engaged as I can, which I feel like I've done a better job at. Of course, those by the nature of the meetings are kind of evolving anyway. Um, but I feel like I've done pretty good at being more involved recently than I had in the past. Um, so I feel like I'm doing
Oh,
good
great.
there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
good.
and I know you talk about like kind of using questions to the kind of shift emotions in the meeting. And I know there's a interview question that my mentor told me about that I ask a lot of times when I'm at, especially in like actual interviews, not necessarily like HR screens, but in actual interviews that's gotten me a lot of compliments on, and it kind of turns that I hate to like say onus, but like instead of them asking you a bunch of questions and kind of probing you, you're almost then turning around and probing them for any information in this case.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. What's that question?
so I don't remember the exact wording, and I've got it written down, but I asked something along the lines of, after everything we've talked about today, all the information I've given you, is there anything that you want to follow up with me on in terms of a gap that maybe that you feel I'm missing, or something that I mentioned that you want to ask me more about, or anything along those lines, something like that. There's probably a better way to word that, but basically ask them, do you have any questions for me based on what I told you? Are there any concerns or fears that you have that I could alleviate right now?
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay. So how would you translate that kind of a question to like a regular staff meeting?
Um, Maybe something on the lines of, is there anything that you still have concerns or questions on that either we didn't talk about today or we did, but you feel that there's something missing or something that wasn't addressed? Maybe
Mm.
something like that potentially.
That sounds really good. That's that's a that's a common question I'll use in coaching or something like that, because oftentimes in a meeting or a conversation or a coaching session, we explore all these things and it's good, and yet there may be a gap. And if I invite the question, then that can be addressed. And so, and what I love about what you're saying, Eric, is that if you're in a meeting And it's like you spent the time to get to the meeting. Like, you're already invested in
Right,
this
right.
thing. And it's like, well, instead of putting it off until next week, is there anything that is coming up to your consciousness that I could address right now? And that's fantastic.
Right. And then I feel like it gives you, well, in the case of like a staff meeting, I imagine it'd probably give more, emotional confidence to the people you're presenting to, because now they feel like they can, you know, grill you, ask you about whatever, and kind of express themselves. And then, in the case of an interview, it kind of gives you some more, a sense of control, or a bit more sense of control, versus where, for the past half hour, 45 minutes, whatever, they've been, you've been bombarded with questions, and now you get to put the onus back on them for at least a little bit.
Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. That's really good. In fact, Eric, I'm so glad you brought that up because part of being a good manager, being a good leader is anticipating where other people's gaps are going to be and inviting them to give you feedback and they may not know how to do that. So if somebody is going into, let's say that you're leveling up, you're now getting into a management position. Let's say it's with people who you know, that you've been peers with in your organization, and now they're going to be reporting to you.
Right.
You're going to want to the big danger for probably most people there is that they're not going to give you valuable feedback, because now in their one-to-ones, like you'll give them feedback and say, really needs you to make sure that these things are perfect before you send them out. So you're going to have to create a checklist or some kind of a system to make sure that there's never any mistakes in this. Like, and then, okay, and what feedback do you have for me? Well, most people are not going to, they're going to say, oh no, like you're doing great. And so you may have to help train or coach the people you're managing now to give you
Right.
valuable feedback and to say, I understand like the dynamic in our relationship is has changed. It's really important to me that you give me feedback. I need that because you see things that I don't see, and you're gonna help me be a better leader by you telling me that stuff. And I understand that you may not even be aware of it yet, but I'll share with you one of the gaps that I'm working on. So I find that when I'm delivering information, I tend to uh, talk too much and confuse some people. Like I'll over
Right.
explain stuff. So, that's just one example. Do you ever see me doing stuff like that? And I'd be like, oh yeah, you know what? I could see that. Okay, cool, cool. Yeah, so it's that kind of thing. That sort of feedback that I'm looking for from you. Like it could be stuff as, George, sometimes I don't really understand what you're talking about. Or George, sometimes it's like you expect me to do something and I don't understand the steps on how to do that, and I don't know
Right.
where to go to get those steps met. Like I tried looking at stuff up on YouTube, and that didn't help. And so you do that, and then or George, there's ways that your expectations of how long something should take are just that's not how long it takes. It takes longer than what you think. Like that kind of thing, and being able to give some examples to your team as ways that they can give you feedback. If you don't do that, they may never give you valuable feedback, or you may have like one or two people who are comfortable doing that, but it just may not be on their radar. to know how to do that. So you may have to teach them. So Eric, I love what you said about that because it's like you're inviting that in a way that people will be able to hear. It's different than just saying, okay, any more questions? No? Okay, good, we're done. But to stop and say, hey, we've talked a lot about all these different things today. It's been good. And before wrapping up, I'm wondering if anybody has any thoughts or concerns that are bubbling up about what we've talked about, anything that was unaddressed that I would be able to hopefully address now, or at least be able to be thinking through outside of this meeting. So any questions, any concerns? And then you've got to wait. And this might be a thing where you even talk a little bit. If I might say, and I want to give everybody a moment to think about this because it's really important, because I know we've addressed a lot of things today, and I wonder if I didn't leave something out, or if there's some kind of a gap here. So I want to make sure that everybody has a moment to think through, what we were looking at. And I might even do a high level kind of, we talked about streamlining communication in this way. We talked about making sure that these steps were set up so that we knew we were getting the correct. We talked about this, and so any questions that you have, and I might just kind of do a little bit of a drag out there, because if I ask and nobody responds right away, a lot of people just haven't had time to process what I just asked. And if I'm getting concerned, if I'm just uncomfortable with space, if I'm uncomfortable with a pause or a fair amount of silence, then I'm going to speak into that, and I'm going to like eat up the oxygen in the room, so to speak, and other
Right.
people are going to feel like they can't. So again, learning how to exit a meeting is really, really a skill. Eric, I'm so glad you brought that in.
Yeah, what you talked about, like giving your manager feedback, I feel like it's part of that kind of managing up that is brought up a lot of times where, your boss is managing you, but in a positive relationship, you would ideally also be managing up. Obviously, it's
Yeah,
not always, doesn't always work out, of course, but
yeah. And I suspect that that trend is going to continue. I think organizations realize that they get better results from everybody when feedback can go both ways. But again, managing up and delivering feedback is a real skill. And especially in today's kind of like PC cancel culture, um, you know, it's really vulnerable to be an authority figure, be a boss. It's incredibly vulnerable. And anything that I do can and will be used against me in one way or another. And so if somebody is giving me feedback, for them to understand that vulnerability will help the feedback come across better. Like, you know, um, I've gotten the feedback, George, sometimes you are more interested in your ideas than what's happening in the room right now, or like what challenges are. Or George, sometimes you love your thoughts and your creativity, and you waste a lot of time when you could just get some results faster. Like that's it's feedback I've gotten, and it's like, oh, I hate it, and then I'm like, I don't want to show that I hate it, and it's like I'm so uncomfortable. But if somebody says, you know, George, would you like to hear something that I think might help with some of the challenges that I think we're experiencing? Then I'd be like, yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah, I want to hear that. I know it's good. But now you've already prepared me. So like my
Yeah,
defenses are down a
I
little
think
bit.
it's the delivery part that I feel like a lot of people I think there's a balance between you you don't want to be indirect, but there's a way to kind of emotionally prepare both parties to give the feedback without being like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
George, you're a monologuer. Can you like not do that anymore? You know, hopefully nobody ever like
yeah,
talks to you like, but you get what I'm getting at. So, but I think and I've been on probably on both ends of that, being probably too direct and probably have received a little too direct feedback, but you know, and so it goes.
yeah, yes, totally. And what I can do is acknowledge like, oh, you know what, this person might not be very trained in delivering feedback. And so, they're
Right,
kind of
right.
blaming, and that doesn't feel that great, but I'm gonna, you know, do the responsible thing and look for what's true about what they're saying. And, just let it go that they're blaming me in the process. Then I may say at a certain point, I may say, thank you for the feedback that you've been giving me. Um, there's feedback I'd give you if you're interested. And okay, well, the way that you use the language when you're telling me there's something that I could do better, you tend to say things in a way that come across as like you're blaming me. And that just doesn't feel good. So I kind of do a lot of work just to be able to hear what you're saying. And it's sort of like oh yeah, 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 I got one. So somebody the other day said that I was robbing them of an opportunity. They're like, oh, you're robbing me of this opportunity. And it was like, no, and it was like, wait, hold on. I'm how am I robbing you? And then, as we worked it through, they're like, okay, you're not robbing me. I just don't like what you're saying. It's not like you're stealing something from me. And so I might be able to communicate that then with somebody and say, some of the language that you use kind of has it blaming me for stuff that's not really accurate. And that just it doesn't feel good. And I suspect that you probably have that in a lot of your interactions. It's probably not just me that kind of has this unsavory response to the way that I feel when you're communicating with me. So just wanted to let you know that. Do you know what I'm talking about? And see what they say. Oh, I haven't noticed that. Yikes. Okay. So, it's really, and this right here on today's topic, emotional intelligence as a leader. And this is so important.
Yeah, before I hop off, there's a podcast I listen to. I think it's Think Fast, Talk Smart, or what is
Uh-huh.
hold on, sorry. Oh shoot, I gotta find it. What is it? Did Think Fast, Talk Smart. And there's an episode where they had a Stanford professor comes in who they kind of talk a lot about giving that feedback, and that's I think kind of the center of what he teaches. And they did like a really intense kind of role play, but
Yeah.
and I mean like it was um, the role play was this guy giving feedback to a coworker who was bad mouthing him behind his back, and it was it was really good. I don't remember the episode or whatever, but it reminds me of what we're talking about today. and highlights a lot about that feedback and that delivery portion.
Oh, that's great. Is it the four principles of powerful focused communication?
So what was that? So it's the podcast of Think Fast, Talk Smart. It is was episode 148,
Okay.
Conviction and Compassion, How to Have Hard Conversations.
Oh, beautiful. Cool. Eric, thank you for that. I will check that out.
Yep. All right. I gotta drop. Appreciate it as always, and we'll
Excellent.
be back next week.
All right. Sounds good, Eric. Take care.
Thank you.
So, well, thank you, Eric, for that interaction and helpful question to ask. So, for everybody viewing in, um, I'll be logging off here soon, but if you have any questions, you can type them into the comment section. And if you're uncomfortable doing that, you can set up a time with me. Or if you just want to connect, learn more about what coaching is, what that looks like, as well as get some directionality with what you're doing. I will offer a 15-minute time. Sometimes it will take more than that, but you can get booked on my calendar that way. And sometimes people get what they're looking for in that 15 minutes, are able to say, okay, I thought I was making the right choices here. It's just great to hear your affirmation of that. Okay, cool. I think I'm good to go moving forward. And sometimes people will look at a bigger challenge and will set up coaching sessions. So I'm happy to meet with you over Zoom or over a phone call. So go ahead and take a look at that link, check it out, meet with me there. And you can always find these videos on YouTube, my YouTube channel. I stream and upload there. There's other content as well around emotional intelligence. And so take advantage of that. All right, everybody. Many blessings. I will be back next week. Take care, everybody.